Listen, that sound is real. Someone made a hollow bone, put their own breath into it, and out came a note that a human being could shape and bend and hold in the air. It is one of the oldest sounds our species ever chose to make on purpose, around 43,000 years old. And here is the strange part, the part that keeps scientists arguing to this very day. We are not entirely sure a modern human made the first one. There is another bone, older than the flutes, from a different kind of human, a Neanderthal, and no one can agree whether it is the first instrument on Earth or just a bone that a predator happened to chew. Tonight, two fires burn in the Ice Age dark, 15,000 years and 1,000 miles apart. At one of them a certainty, at the other a mystery we may never solve, both about the same astonishing thing, the moment a human mind added a whole new sense to the world. The moment silence stopped being the only music, begin in the older dark, in a valley in what is now Slovenia, more than 50,000 years ago. The people here are Neanderthals. Not the hunched, grunting brutes of old cartoons, but strong, clever, deeply human beings who had already ruled this cold land for longer than our own species has existed. Call this one Kesh. He crouches near the fire in a cave we now call Divj Babe, turning something over and over in his thick, careful hands. It is a piece of bone, the thigh of a young cave bear. And it has holes in it, round holes spaced along its length in a rough line. Now, Kesh did not necessarily make those holes. That is the whole mystery, and we will come to it honestly. But imagine, just for a moment, that he lifts the bone toward his face. Imagine he blows across the broken, open end, the way you might blow across the mouth of an empty bottle. And imagine the bone answers, a low, breathy, wavering tone rising up out of the dark. For a creature that has known only the sounds the world hands out, the wind in the pines, the water over stone, the roar of a bear, the cries of its own kind, a made sound is a revelation. A sound that comes from nowhere in nature. A sound you create on purpose and can start and stop and change. A voice that outlives the mouth that made it. Imagine his fingers finding the holes, covering one and then another, and hearing the note shift and climb. Imagine the first, dawning understanding that this thing can be played. Did any of that actually happen? We honestly do not know. That is the maddening, wonderful truth at the center of this story. But the bone is real. It is tens of thousands of years old. It came out of a cave where Neanderthals lived, and it has holes. And that is enough, just barely enough, to start the oldest argument in the history of music. Because think about what would follow if it were true. If a Neanderthal really did lift this bone and coax a note from it, then music does not belong to us. Then we were not the first to sing. Then a different kind of human, the one we like to imagine as the brute, the also-ran, the evolutionary dead end, got to one of the most beautiful things a mind can do first, thousands of years before we ever arrived in Europe. That is what is really at stake in this small, chewed, contested bone. Not just a date on a museum label, but the question of whose mind first reached past survival and into song. Here is the fork in the road, and we are going to walk down both sides of it fairly, because both sides are made of serious people with serious evidence. The object from Divj Babe is a fragment of a young cave bear's thigh bone, with 4 holes that line up along one side of it. One camp of scientists says this is an instrument, a deliberately made flute, shaped by Neanderthal hands and the oldest musical instrument ever found on Earth. Their strongest argument is about the holes themselves, and it is a good one. Researchers took fresh young bear bones and tried, again and again, to punch matching holes using casts of the actual teeth of wolves, hyenas, and bears. And they found that random biting does not easily produce holes so cleanly aligned, so evenly spaced, so neatly placed down the middle of the shaft. On top of that, pointed stone tools sharp enough to pierce bone were found in the same cave layers as the object. The other camp says not so fast, and their argument is just as grounded. Cave bears hibernated and died by the thousands inside caves exactly like this one. And hyenas denned in those same caves, cracking and puncturing the soft bones of dead bear cubs to get at the fat and marrow inside. A hyena's pointed canine tooth, driven hard into a young bear's thigh, can leave behind a clean, round hole. Do it a few times in the way a hyena works a bone, and you can get a rough row of them, no musician required. To these skeptics, the famous flute is not an instrument at all. It is a snack. The chewed-over leftovers of an Ice Age scavenger, mistaken by hopeful modern eyes for a work of art. So which is it, a Neanderthal masterpiece or a hyena's garbage? The honest answer even now is that we still do not know for certain. The object sits today in a museum in Slovenia, proudly labeled the oldest instrument in the world, with an asterisk beside it that may never, ever come off. and we should sit with that uncertainty rather than pretend it away. Now, while the scholars argue over that one contested bone, let us step back and look at the bigger picture, because there is no argument at all about what came next. Whether or not the Neanderthals sang first, we know for absolute certain that somebody was making real, undeniable music in Ice Age Europe. The proof comes from a small cluster of caves in southern Germany in a region called the Swabian Jura, and unlike the Slovenian bone, this proof is beyond serious doubt. And this is where the story becomes genuinely extraordinary, because those same small caves did not only give us flutes, they gave us the beginning of art itself. From these caves came the Lion Man, a figurine carved from mammoth ivory, a standing human body topped with the head of a lion, a creature that exists nowhere in nature. Somebody imagined it and then carved it into being. It is one of the oldest pieces of imaginative art ever found. From these same caves came the Venus of Hoel Fels, a small, bold, unmistakable carving of a woman's body, the oldest known depiction of the human form, and from these caves came the flutes. Sculpture, figurines, and music all appearing together in one small region, in one narrow slice of time. It is as if a switch flipped inside the human mind all at once in one place. As if imagination itself woke up and began pouring out of people's hands in ivory and bone. And here is a thought that some scientists take seriously. Maybe this was not a coincidence. Maybe music and art and imagination were part of the very edge that let modern humans spread while the Neanderthals faded. A song binds a group together. It carries knowledge across distance and generations. It knits strangers into allies. Perhaps the people who could sing could also cooperate on a scale no one else could match. We cannot prove it, but it is a haunting possibility that one of the softest, least practical things our ancestors ever made was also, quietly, one of the most powerful weapons they ever carried. These people were the Aurignacians, some of the very first modern humans to spread across Europe, moving into a cold continent that Neanderthals still walked. And into this world of new, exploding art walks the maker of the most astonishing flute of them all. Not a lucky bone with holes in it, not a hollow tube ready-made by nature. A flute built deliberately from a material that has no hollow inside it at all. Call her Vila. 15,000 years after the fire in the Slovenian cave has gone cold, she sits in a Swabian cave with a problem that would take genius to solve. She wants a flute, and she already knows the easy way. The finest simple flutes come from the naturally hollow wing bones of birds, like the wing bone of a griffin vulture that became the very flute we heard at the start of this story, hollow already, ready to be pierced and played. But Vila wants something better than a bird bone, and she reaches for mammoth ivory, which is a problem because ivory is solid. A dense, heavy piece of tusk with no hollow anywhere inside it. To make a flute out of a solid object with nothing but stone tools, she has to do something that sounds almost impossible. She has to split the ivory lengthwise into two long, matching halves. Then she has to carve out the inside of each half, hollowing them, thinning the walls, patiently shaping the smooth channel that the air will one day sing through. Then she cuts the finger holes, and she cannot put them just anywhere. They have to sit in exactly the right places, or the notes will come out wrong and the whole instrument will be ruined. And then this is the detail that truly stops you. She fits the two carved halves back together and seals the seam between them so perfectly that it is airtight. Not a whisper of breath escapes. Think about the planning that requires. She had to hold the entire finished instrument in her mind before she ever made the first cut. She had to see the flute that did not yet exist and work backwards step by careful step to get there. There is simply no way to explain this bone as an accident. No hyena did this. No lucky chew, no random puncture. This is design. Pure, patient, intentional human design, tens of thousands of years old. And it is worth pausing on the sheer age of what she is holding. These German flutes have been dated to somewhere around 42 to 43,000 years ago, among the oldest musical instruments anywhere on Earth that no one seriously disputes. The bird bone flute we heard at the very start came from these same caves, made from the naturally hollow wing bone of a griffin vulture, about 13 inches long, pierced with 5 carefully placed finger holes. These were not one-off experiments. They were a tradition, a way of making music that people taught to one another, refined and carried forward for thousands of years in one small stretch of river valleys. And here is the payoff that removes every last doubt. When modern craftsmen build replicas of these flutes and play them, they work. Clear, strong notes, tunable pitches. A recognizable musical scale, sounding out across 40,000 years, exactly as it did the day Vila finished it. Now put that flute to use, because these instruments were never museum pieces to the people who made them. They were tools for surviving the dark. It is deep winter, the worst kind, the glacial cold that does not merely hurt but kills. Outside, the world is white death. Inside, a small band of humans huddles around a fire that is slowly losing its fight. Winters like this break people, and not only their bodies. Hunger frays every temper. The dark is endless and the days are short and gray. Someone is sick, someone is grieving. Someone has stopped talking and is quietly giving up. Because a group can die of more than cold and hunger. It can die of despair. It can simply come apart, each frightened person retreating into their own private terror, until there is no band left, only strangers freezing side by side. And then into that fraying dark, Vila lifts the flute. The first note rises, thin and clear and impossibly steady, over the crackle of the fire and the low moan of the wind outside. And something happens that no spear can do, no fire can do, no tool can do. The sound reaches into every single person in that cave at the same instant and pulls them for a moment into one shared feeling. The child stops crying, the old one closes their eyes, the grieving one finally lets out a long, shaking breath. They are not alone inside their own heads anymore. They are together, all of them, inside a single unbroken sound. This is what music is for at its deepest root. This is the thing it was invented to do. It is a technology of togetherness, a way to take a scattering of frightened, freezing, half-broken individuals and make them, for one night, into a single living thing. There is a risk in it, too, and they know it. Out in the killing dark, sound carries. A song can tell the things that hunt by night exactly where the warm bodies are. But for these people on this night, the risk is worth it. Because the song is the one thing strong enough to hold them together until the sun finally, mercifully, comes back. And when the melody finally ends, something has changed in that cave, though no one could put it into words. The despair has loosened its grip. The band has remembered that it is a band. They will make it to morning. Not because the flute brought them food or warmth or drove off a single predator, but because it reached into all of them at once and reminded them they were not alone. That is a kind of survival tool no other animal has ever possessed. A hollow bone, a breath, and a melody, and a freezing night that would have broken them becomes instead a night they lived through together. Let both fires burn all the way down now. The Neanderthal fire in Slovenia, more than 50,000 years gone. The human fire in Germany, 40,000 years gone. Both cold now for far longer than our minds can truly hold. And down in the ground beneath each one, a single bone, one of them is certain. The mammoth ivory flute of the Swabian Jura, split, hollowed, holed, and sealed airtight by a mind that planned every cut before it made the first one. It is, beyond any doubt, an instrument, something built to sing. The other is forever contested. The pierced cave bear bone of Divj Babe may be the very first instrument any human being ever made, tens of thousands of years before the rest, or maybe just a hyena's abandoned meal, and we may never know which. But step all the way back from the argument and something strange happens. The argument almost stops mattering, because either way, whichever bone came first, the truth underneath is exactly the same. Somewhere in the long Ice Age dark, whether it was a Neanderthal beside a Slovenian fire, or a modern human deep in a German cave, someone lifted a hollow bone, put their breath into it, and made a sound that had never existed in the world before. They added a whole new sense to what it means to be alive. Not just to hear the world as it comes at you, but to answer it, to shape the empty air on purpose into something that carries feeling from one heart to another across a fire. And across, it turns out, far more than a fire. Across 40,000 years, because you heard it yourself at the very start. That is the same sound, it reached you. Before there was a single line of language written down anywhere on earth, before there was one word of poetry or prayer, there was this. A voice made of nothing but bone and breath, rising in the freezing dark. And in that moment, somewhere out there in the Ice Age, by some fire whose ashes we may never even find, silence ended.